Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and good morning. Welcome to today's presentation of A Day in the Life of a Frontline Worker using Microsoft 365. Our speakers today will be Witham's Jeff Willinger, the Digital Experience Director and Microsoft MVP, Ken Young, the Specialist Director at Microsoft, and Ken Milner, Frontline Worker Global Black Belt with Microsoft. Our presentation will run for about an hour, and we'll be taking questions in the chat for the presenters to discuss and answer. If you have any technical issues, please also use that chat so I can assist. And this morning, we're going to start with Ken Young. So Ken, whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Brenna. Appreciate it. So I kind of want to really kind of set the stage here, right? Y'all are investing an hour with us today, and we, honestly really appreciate that. But this will be kind of fast and furious. So I kind of went like, how do we plan to make this valuable? And trust me, I'm trying not to bang through a bunch of slides here. I want to get to the, I'll call it the real content with Mr. Willinger and Mr. Miller there. But I think it's really important to point out kind of what are we addressing, right? Because the frontline staff for us are staff that Microsoft in the past really didn't really address from a technology standpoint, from a price standpoint, from really as far as engagement and looking towards them, because it was looked at by IT as too expensive, right? Many times too expensive. But also the software that was for them was viewed as, I'll say, neutered or muted software. Where now and today, and we'll show this, is actually the frontline software and the abilities we've got in Teams and Viva, it's a superset of what y'all are used to as knowledge workers. So we want to make sure we call that out, right? And then there's that business value. Like, why are we empowering this staff? What's the reason? And I can't tell you how many IT folks have come to me and brought CorpCom and HR, and they're like, how do we help these people, right? These licenses are either too expensive or it's too difficult to roll out, and how do we manage that, right? And how do we get them engaged and bring them into an inclusive type culture? So you'll see that. Jeff's going to go through a couple specific, really nice customer examples of how that was addressed. Deep screenshots, as much as he was allowed to share, and abilities there, what those users are going to see there, and go through some of those use cases. Looking at what was brought to bear. Some of this is native Teams features, some of it's native Viva features, some of it's native Power Apps features, and all these come to bear. And you'll see this as Teams being that platform where all these abilities live. So these users, whether they're on a desktop, a laptop, a mobile device, tablet, whatever, they're gaining all these features from Teams, from Viva, and from Power Apps. So again, kind of that addressable market. And I love some of these stats. I'll put this in the chat later. This is all from what's called the Work Trends Index. And I don't recommend a lot of these long reads unless you want to take a nap most of the time. But this is actually pretty good data. And this is the Work Trends Index that looked at, what are we addressing for these people? Because as we all went through the, I call it the Global Work from Home Initiative, how did that affect people? People working long hours, too many hours. Some people adjusted to work the hours that are natural for them that may not be natural for others, right? How do we measure that? How do we check that? We now have that ability to measure that and understand that, right? And I think some of the stats we've had here as far as what are the organizational differences? Shows on here, 21% of these organizations are gaining greater profitability from employee engagement. And if 80% of our workers are the frontline staff, as stated here, again, I deal with a lot of logistics, a lot of retail, a lot of manufacturing, engineering firms that have got, these are their frontline. These are the people that are out there that we need to get information in front of. And then we need to actually get that a good information in front of them quickly, right? And then the other piece I love, highly engaged employees are 12 times less likely to leave their company, right? Nobody doesn't really generally leave the company. They leave their manager. They leave because of lack of tools. They leave because lack of a cohesive environment and being engaged and being brought in and felt like they're a part of that environment. And that's something, again, these are all pieces we saw really clearly in the Work Trends Index. I'm not going to drain this slide, but I'm a huge believer in these six buckets and what are these challenges we're seeing here. But over half of frontline leadership says they're not prioritizing that workforce. They aren't included in the culture. Over 2/3 of people would like to spend more time on professional learning, right? Bringing learning into their environment, bringing learning into, I'll say, where they work every day, bringing learning into Teams, bringing CorpCom into Teams, bringing HR into Teams. Those abilities are very, very critical. Over half of the frontline workers don't feel valued. Well, generally, it's not an inclusive environment. We haven't brought them in. We haven't included them in the culture, right? Culture is critical, especially with forces today. Over a third, their voice isn't being heard. Over half, if learning was engaged across their platform, they'd be more likely to stay, right? Stick around in that environment. And that's one of the biggest things we're addressing. Easily onboarding employees, and I'll say easily offboarding employees for seasonal workers and things like that. One thing Microsoft hadn't done a great job of in the past is easily allowing IT to onboard, offboard, but then also using, I'll say, role-based administration and delegate administration into operations, into the business, right? The people that manage these folks to be able to deal with identity, doing things like scanning QR codes and badges for authentication, and bringing these people in easily without dealing with password change and password management. Or the simple pushing of apps, and some things will show in Teams. I can now push that down to a manager level and have Teams apps show up on their mobile device that was designed by their manager based on their role. And their role changes, their manager can change their access. So again, I wanted to make sure I address today really why we're addressing this and how we're addressing this. And again, I'll pop in the chat the work trend index. But at this point, I'll hand it over to Jeff to take it on from this point.
Thanks, Ken. This next section, I'm going to talk about building a community. When I think about community, I happen to be at the Microsoft MVP Summit this week, and I don't know if you guys know how you could determine someone's a Microsoft MVP. There's a pop quiz for everyone. They usually tell you within 5 seconds of meeting them. I just happen to be at the MVP Summit, and let me tell you, this community of MVPs is second to none. I literally, first of all, obviously, I'm humbled and proud to be a part of it, but how do I translate that type of buzz to a frontline worker? So when I think about what a frontline worker, what's important to them, what is important? How do I translate our culture to someone that might be driving a truck, maybe helping someone at a grocery store, helping someone at a retail store? How do we get that sort of buzz, if you will, around that? That's what we're going to talk about right now. So let us take you on a little journey, right? Creating that company-wide dialogue, literally between what I would call the bosses, if you will, and the actual frontline worker. So here we meet frontline worker Joe. He wants to connect with his colleagues. He wants company leadership. He wants to feel more a part of the actual organization. So he and his fellow coworkers join a community channel to chat with each other, but find answers when they need it and share best practices. I know you don't usually hear that type of thing in an organization, but if the frontline workers are sort of empowered to do this, they're maybe able to express feedback to their managers in their own voice and have a direct line to company leadership and news and all the information they need to do their job. If he lives in a town, if he participates in a town hall, or if he's unable to attend, he listens to meeting recordings after the fact. And with that, Joe has that sort of feeling of belonging. Remember when Facebook came out and everyone's like, wow, I'm on Facebook. I remember, I don't know how long ago it was. It was a number of years, but I had an admin and she came into my office and she said, Jeff, I just saw you on Facebook. And I thought, wow, is Facebook just for kids or what? Well, obviously I was an early adopter, but having that feeling of community and really belonging to me is sort of the secret sauce. So let's do a sort of deeper dive into what this looks like, building that community. I mentioned earlier, strengthening that connection between employees. I don't care what's in a hot dog, just make it taste good. I don't care what's in this application, just make it easy for me to use. And guess what the secret sauce is here? It's Teams. Teams really enables you to create communities aligned to shared interests and functions that allow those frontliners to build a network. Number one to me is finding answers to questions that you might not know. Sharing best practices is sort of, we have to incentivize these frontline workers to do that. Most frontline workers are sort of like this. They're really just focused on their job and they're not really willing, or they just don't know how to share best practices, but make it easy for them. But one of my favorites really is that sense of belonging in the workplace. If, like I said, if I'm talking to customers all day, whether I'm a bank teller or whether I am a reservation agent, I want to feel that belonging, and I want to sort of answer questions on the fly. And with my mobile device, I'm able to do that. Let's take a look at this two-way dialogue between leadership and frontline workers. So really having the tools and discussions across the entire workforce foster that open dialogue, things that never have happened before are happening now. Most of these workers do not have desktops, so the only way to do that is with their mobile device. So let's look at opportunities for companies. So for company-wide engagement, let's take a quick look at that. So like I said, I don't care what's in a hot dog, just make it taste good. Some of the samples I'm going to show you in a little while. The question I get, what were the tools that were used? Yammer, soon to be Engage, Amplify, Connections. The samples I'm going to show you in a little while are definitely on all of these. And this is just a little scenario. Again, we're going to pass out the deck to everyone, so you'll be able to, I'm not going to read through this, but when you've got 670 wholesale stores in 24 countries, this Metro AG, they're a ginormous wholesaler in the professional hospitality business, and they run their business through their customers. This requires creating a connected workforce across the entire organization. So once again, Teams is the secret sauce here. I get that a lot. So what are you using? What are you using? Deploying Teams and getting your arms around all the different capabilities is going to be a big win. And what are the benefits? Obviously, an improvement. Actually, here I'm reading a quote now. I like being able to use Teams to connect with the headquarters whenever I need to. Kind of a cool thing. I never really thought about that, right? So being able to keep that open dialogue open between you, the frontline worker, and CorpCom, or the person that's running it, is going to be a really big benefit. Now I'm going to pass it over to Ken Milner.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, guys, I work with many customers, and we see a common theme in that, although frontline workers represent 80% of the workforce, and there are over 2 billion of those guys, and 88% of the organizations have frontline workers. They've really been overlooked during the digital transformation process. What we see is just inconsistent processes, manual experiences, outdated technology throughout the frontline workers. And when I talk to customers, they are having problems attracting and retaining employees. As we know, Gen Z and millennials just won't join an organization without the latest up-to-date technology. And we see a lot of transition and challenges onboarding and attracting these frontline workers due to those reasons. Some recent examples of some customers I've spoken to was that a large retailer was using outdated technology. They were caught, of course, during the beginning of the pandemic. They were not able to provide automated processes like curbside pickup or buy online pickup in store. So they really had to scramble to add technology and processes. Prior to that, the point of sale system was 20 years old. And so when you don't invest in these frontline workers, you're not able to adapt to the customers. And that's the other feedback. The frontline workers often are the face of the customer to most end users. And if we overlook and don't invest in these guys, we don't shine a positive light on the customer experience from that organization with the frontline workers. So we'll take a look at some of the scenarios that we enable with the Microsoft technologies and what the challenges are. So corporate communications is by far the number one workload. Many organizations have no digital way to reach out to their frontline workers. We see them using personal email, text, or even worse, consumer apps. I often joke that one of the number one competitors for corporate comms and frontline workers is WhatsApp. It's not secure. Of course, there's all types of issues with data privacy and data protection. But if organizations don't provide these tools for their frontline workers, the frontline workers are going to use consumer apps. And we have to overcome that obstacle, get ahead of it. So corporate communications. The next one is flexibility with shift and schedule management. Just having an automated way to arrange shifts and schedules. Many organizations, they still have to call up. I was working with a big airline. We may have heard about, some of the challenges in the airline industry recently. A lot of times during an emergency, they don't even have ways to reassign or reallocate shifts. They have to call an 800 number to determine what their shift is, or if they've been rerouted. One of the number one customer satisfaction is, or one of the number one reasons that frontline workers leave is lack of flexibility when it comes to shifts. Again, another recent customer determined that a disproportionate number of users hadn't worked on the weekends. And if you have to work every weekend, you don't have the flexibility to swap a shift, to schedule a shift, to even claim or request a new shift to earn extra money when you need to, and you need an automated way to do that. Those organizations that had flexibility in shift management had a better retention rate with frontline workers. We have this capability with our solution, and we also have the capability to connect to workforce management systems that you already invested in, from UKG, Blue Yonder, and Reflexes. Many organizations use our solution as the system of engagement for frontline workers, and the system of record are the existing investments that they made in UKG and the other tools. But shift management, schedule management, flexibility is probably the number two workload that number two challenge that our customers face, and the number two workload that we work on when onboarding frontline workers. The next one, of course, is training and onboarding. Many airlines, especially transportation logistics companies, have to do background checks. Again, talking to another recent customer, it took 4 weeks to onboard a frontline worker, and many of those workers would abandon or find another job during the onboarding process. So their retention rate was very low. So you need automated ways to onboard those frontline workers, provide digital training with the existing tools or connection to your learning management system that you've already invested in, but ways for safety training, compliance training, or just training to get a promotion. That system of record that you access from your personal device, work device, phone, or tablet is needed for those frontline workers. And finally, the other big one is digitizing manual processes. Anytime you see someone walking around with a keyboard or a clipboard or a notepad, that represents an opportunity to digitize manual processes. We provide some applications, but using low code, no code apps or solutions to automate manual processes is the key. You will see one later today, but significant amount of time in digitizing manual processes for consistent efficiency and productivity is key to the success for frontline workers. Of course, digital ecosystem, health and well-being are all key, but those top four, the first four, are the key, and this is where we help you, and you'll see the example later, and we'll come back and discuss those solutions. So I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
Thank you so much, Ken. Great information. If I had one slide that we could literally talk about this entire presentation, it's this slide. I call this the money slide. So when we think about a frontline worker and where they're actually doing most of their work, it's obviously going to be on their phones. And if you think about all the different things, and Ken had talked about this, really covered everything, right? If I want to swap a shift, if I want to punch in, if I need, if I've got some different tasks that I might need to be accountable for, corporate communications, actual chat, actual calling, getting all my learning all in one place. My whole dashboard, okay, I worked 38 hours this week and my paycheck is going to be fill in the blank. This is a great opportunity to introduce the Power Platform and Power Apps, different ways, different workflows that actually make my life a lot easier. How about a walkie-talkie, using it as a walkie-talkie to my other colleagues if I'm working on the if I'm working in the warehouse and I need to find out if we have any extra, I don't know, toilet paper, fill in the blank, able to use your mobile device as a walkie-talkie as a frontline worker. Virtual visits, also great. One of my favorites that I don't think that we use enough of, and we use it a lot at my organization, is praise, giving praise to folks in the organization that really do something special, whatever that might be. Documents is another area, especially when it comes to HR, showing what do I need to do, and when do I need to do it. And then probably stuff that keeps not necessarily me up at night, but a lot of those chief security officers, making sure that it's secure. Ken just mentioned something about using one app, or WhatsApp, I should say, and that's not nearly as secure as using Teams and using your actual the Microsoft suite as your sort of platform, if you will. Let's get into a couple case studies. Sound good? Let's do this. All right, this first one is a little company called Discover. They're based up in north of Chicago, I should say. And this is something that you'll see the different renderings of what it looks like on my desktop, on my tablet, on my mobile device. All the things that are important to me. Ken Young mentioned earlier, how do we determine what do we put on there? Well, I'm going to show you another case study in a moment. Every organization is different. Sometimes we show, let's make it easy. Let's make my job easy. In this case at Discover, all the frontline workers that actually deal with, folks like us on a regular basis, that's what this is for. Let's move on to the next one. I am loving this. Imagine I'm working at a hamburger restaurant, and at that hamburger restaurant, I want to swap a shift. There might be a big party that's going on. All the information I need is going to be on my actual mobile device. So when I come into the store, I'm connected to the store's Wi-Fi. Once I'm connected to the store's Wi-Fi, I'm able to use whatever HR system you might be using, whether it's Workday or one of the other ones, and I'm able to actually log in through my mobile device. No more punching clocks, make my life easier. Cuties are coming. That's just like one of the things that they're doing right now, or had done in the past. So letting frontline workers know what's going on. We talk about this idea of communication. So HR people love this. Corporate communication people really love this. And a question that I get a lot is, well, who's usually responsible for these types of projects? And honestly, it's a marriage of both IT and the business. My favorite clients, and I know I could probably speak for the two Kens, our favorite clients are people that get maybe the business side, that get the IT side, or the IT folks that get the business side. Let's solve a problem. We're not doing this just to do this. And then finally, here's another one, a large grocery store, basically the Walmart of Canada, and all the frontline workers, they all have their mobile devices while they're working. And I'm not talking about checking Facebook or Instagram. I'm talking about actually getting more work done. If there's a romaine lettuce recall and I'm in the produce section, I want to make sure I get that lettuce off the floor ASAP. Let's get into a case study. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this before we summarize some other points. So one of my absolute favorite retail stores, I can't say enough great things about the folks at Home Depot. So I'm going to show you two scenarios. One is the salaried employee, I'll call them the information worker, versus Yanni, the associate, which is also the frontline worker, right? Same header, quick access toolbar, footer for any type of employee. You could share the modules when it makes sense. Salaried employees are most likely interested in company meetings and upcoming meetings, whereas associates or frontline workers are most likely interested in getting their schedules done and getting stuff done quickly, as you might imagine. So for the associates and store employees, so the navigation is really focused on the things that are important to them: HR, help, support, my company. It's very easy to hide these as well if it's not relevant to those employees. Helping these store employees keep track of their schedules, their shifts by highlighting the next few days let them get more in depth with highlighting the month, requesting time off, trading shifts. I mentioned this earlier, allowing them to clock in and clock out, surface the relevant training, what they're saved, what they're being recommended, highlight team members. I love that as well. And surfacing recent favorite easy access. Remember I mentioned earlier, make my job easier. And with this little sort of snippet that I'm showing you, it definitely makes their job a lot easier. And it really doesn't matter what HR system it is. We bring it all into, underneath the covers here, it's all SharePoint. Here we have news in a pretty prominent spot on the current platform. It's important to keep it, to keep it for associates, but downplay it perhaps, because they might be more engrossed in things that are relevant to themselves. Surface relevant and most recent conversations that are happening in the warehouse to keep them up to date and aware of different activities. Again, make my life easier, make it, easy for me to do my job. So for the salaried and corporate employees, I'm going to sort of run through this. Very exact same look and feel as we talked about earlier, but maybe not as salaried employees are more focused on their day-to-day meetings as well as maybe upcoming traffic. Surfacing this upfront, that's where we get the value. Using Power BI to help show data around things that they might be interested in. Salaried employees might also want access to news earlier, so having that front and center and making it important to them that they could either engage on it or continue reading. We think that salary employees also obviously want to be connected to their teammates, very similar to the frontline worker. So I'm going to sort of skim through this a little bit and really focus more on, I mentioned this earlier, getting the right information to the right employee at the right time, and the ability to search, which is usually the number one pain point. Again, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about there in a second. So again, the things that are important to whether it's a salaried employee or a frontline worker, using that predictive search by showing recommendations. If I'm searching for the PTO policy, seeing what that is right there, then you click on it. And you see the 19 results for the PTO policy. So having it front and center, just like I might be on Bing or something like that, making it easy for me to search things and filter them to get to the right policy that I'm looking for. So if I'm a warehouse employee, yes, I'm showing this on a desktop, but I'm going to show you what it looks like on a mobile device in a moment. So this sort of just zooms in on the search. Their intranet is called My Apron. I definitely recommend, we haven't really talked about this, but making sure that you have a name for your actual intranet or employee hub or employee experience center, whatever you want to call it. It's vital. So that employees are like, hey, did you see that on My Apron? Hey, did you see that on My Microsoft or Witham Way? That's what we call it at Witham. So having a destination, having a name on it is going to be very important. Integrating chatbots into the search experience to make it very, very seamless, right? So getting user-specific information. So we'll go back to Laurel again. Home Depot concierge bot, asking a specific question on it, getting different options for the answer. And you'll just see how this plays out. Having it seamless, creating that seamless environment, the ability to search, get accurate information every time. Again, that's the number one pain point when I talk to organizations. Where does it hurt most? It's usually the search experience. But now using with different AI and different systems that Microsoft has been investing in that are slowly but surely coming down to the customers are going to be a super great way to find things in a timely fashion. All I think about is how do we engage the employees, and then what do we want to do with them? And in this particular case, let's go back to here. So having that, in their case, they're actually using Salesforce. We're recommending them to move over to Yammer, which is now becoming Engage. It's amazing the sentiment, just being at the Microsoft MVP conference, hearing how other MVPs and their clients, the new perceived value of Engage, it's a new version of Yammer, maybe a slightly better interface, getting as much out of the box functionality. And guess what? It integrates seamlessly with SharePoint, as you might imagine. And again, in this case, My Apron, right? Being available anytime on any device. We talked about that earlier. So here's Yanni. They really want an app so that people could get notifications without having a lot of email. That is for sure. A frontline worker does not want to see email, right? So we wanted to do both an app and create a responsive site all in one. So if you look at this, let's zoom in on this. So here's Yanni's taken an original posting on the warehouse. He mentions a colleague. He jumps over to My Apron. He opens the menu. He clicks on the search bar, My Departments, searches on that, goes to the appliance that one of the customers has got a question on, so he clicks on that. Then he sees all the different options for this appliance, but he's got a specific thing that he's looking for. He doesn't want to walk away from the customer. He wants to stay with the customer, right in front of the customer. Of course, he does this much quicker than I'm talking about it. Scrolls down, sees the different conversations, the different team members that he might be able to get get the question answered. Looking at the resources, in this case, he's looking here. He could favorite these documents or pages from his list and download the documents, literally send them to the client right there in front of them. These are things that have never really been done before for a frontline worker. I don't know what they did. They probably printed them out and gave them to the customer, or worse, got it and someone faxed it to them or something like that. I don't even know. I don't know how they used to do it, but this is the future. The future is here. They don't have this currently. Their site is made up of a number of different documents, but in this case, after selecting the delivery information, he chooses Electrolux, various delivery information that he wants to get notes on. And that's that case study. I'm going to pass it back over to Ken Young.
Awesome. Thanks you, Jeff. Appreciate it. So, I mean, the key things here, with the possibilities, and one thing I want to make sure I point out here is this is a journey, right? So Jeff sold some really cool stuff. But let's be honest, right? That was a journey, right? They started small, kind of crawl, walk, run, and they built around that, and they built these things out. And those are big customers that had big solutions. But again, out of the 99% of it being out of the box type functionality. We've had a lot of the questions around things like walkie-talkie. Yep, it's there out of the box. Shift and schedule integration right into things like Kronos and some of the other solutions out there. Yep, right out of the box. Little configuration required, and that's there. And I get asked all the time in these, kind of where do we start with this? And a lot of it starts with engagement, inclusive nature, and communications. Jeff mentioned too that, CorpCom's thrilled or HR's thrilled, and it's really true. I've seen years of this, of CorpCom and HR knocking on IT's door. And I won't give my standard response, but I know IT is more like, hey, no time, no budget, can't address them right now. Your knowledge workers have it, more or less, go away, right? Nicely. And this has now brought that ability there. But what we've learned, through the global work from home, again, as I'll call it, is we have to communicate with staff how they best consume, how they want to be communicated with on devices they're on, whether it's a walk-up device, shared device, mobile device, tablet, or a desktop, we have to communicate with them in their means. And this is also sometimes that's chat, sometimes that's Viva Engage or a Yammer and a Yammer community, and sometimes it's old school email, right? And that's there as well. But we now have that ability to understand for CorpCom and say, hey, I'm going to do a campaign of communications, but I can now understand how it's been accepted by that staff as well, right? Not just read receipt, but you'll see some things coming along the line here, things like Viva Amplify and some of the abilities we have coming along that are just there to enhance this communications, because at 99% of the time, that's where this starts. Back to my original premise. This starts with how do we communicate with the staff? And again, it starts kind of one way, push, but then ends up being two-way kind of pull. And then how do the, where do these users, get information, et cetera? Where do they go for that? And then we started advancing that now. So AI, Jeff mentioned chatbots and AI. Well, I've seen many of my customers saying, hey, I'm going to create a chatbot to answer most of these common HR questions. But also we start to get into common questions or FAQs or whatever to information for their job, right? It could be advanced things of how do I inspect a high-low? How do I inspect my vehicle? Do I do a walk around? Do I do a check sheet every day? And that's critical for this customer for compliance. So maybe it's compliance need and they'll start there and then add CorpCom. So it's this, my point being again, crawl, walk, run. I'm going to start where it makes sense, but you can't boil the ocean. You can't do it all at once. I mean, you all know that. But that's where it's this, I've got up there, transform the employee experience. And that's what this is. These users have to be brought, this information brought to them in their terms, their means, during their shift, during their time. And then we get into operational efficiency. Automated workflows. Jeff showed a lot of this, right? Simple document routing, simple approval routing. Maybe it's shift scheduled and shifts changed. I need a simple approval for that. Maybe it's more complex, right? I have customers with ships, right? I may have to do some pretty critical inspection before this thing leaves port. Maybe I need a routing approval because we made a change that needed approval based on my operational profile. So there's a lot of things where I can do operationally. And then last, we've got on here, safeguard your business. The nice part is everything we're talking about lives in the platform, right? Teams is the platform, and there's a reason for that, right? I can do e-discovery. All that data is there. The exchange, the data is in Exchange or it's in SharePoint, it's in, AKA OneDrive, the data is there. So now I've got the redundancy, I've got the backup copies, but I've also got my compliance and my e-discovery. So when I need things like DLP, and I have to protect against things like PCI compliance and the fun DSS specs and or ITAR and all the other funness that we have to deal with, those compliance abilities, they're there. Jeff mentioned the third-party tools that are out there. Oh yeah, I see them. Things like WeChat, those are out there as well. The employees, the frontline workers will find a way, right? If they are not, given the tools, to Jeff's point, if they're not given the tools and the ability to do this communications, they'll make their own way. They will find a way. This way, we're providing the tools that are secure. So we're safeguarding the employees, we're safeguarding your customers' data, and we're maintaining our compliance, really kind of as required. So I put the work trend index in the chat. I think it's interesting, really to look at, because certain parts of it really speak loudly to our customers and to the CEOs, COOs, operational staff, HR staff, and IT. There's a lot of pieces there that are very interesting. I get asked a lot too, like, all right, so what do we do here? Like, okay, this is interesting, good info. Oh, by the way, I saw a lot of questions on licensing. Let me clear that up. Teams is there. If they have a 365 license, they have Teams, right? Whether they're Frontline, what's called F1, God knows I hate our nomenclature, but F1s, F3s, all those Teams abilities are there, E3s, etc. I saw somebody mention, oh my gosh, E5, this big expensive beast license. Nope, not required for anything we showed here today, did not require that. And I think there's suspicion about callouts, and there's a reason for this. And a lot of this comes down to Microsoft's mindset of empowering these frontline workers and making these licenses consumable and available, not only from a feature function, but from a price standpoint. I mean, an F1 is a great example. It doesn't have email. Guess what? A lot of frontline workers don't need email. So why should you pay for it, right? The cost of goods sold for Microsoft goes down. They need Teams. They want chat. They want integration. They want those abilities. They want the Viva, they want Engage and communications that Viva provides out of the box. And those are there for them, for those users, no matter. And they're on this licensing program. They've got those abilities there. So my point being, don't let that be a barrier. I see a lot of IT orgs say, oh, our licensing is too expensive. I can't do that. Well, generally, they're looking at knowledge worker licensing, knowledge worker costs, and they're extrapolating that across their frontline user base and saying, not doing that, that's too much money. That barrier has been taken away. It's not to say it's free, but it's cost aligned to these employees and to the scale and to what's needed by that staff out there. So that's a big deal. So again, rewind back to where do we go and how do we take this forward? What I'm going to suggest is, work with Witham, work with Jeff, work with your Microsoft account team, and get a day in the life done for your team. Because that's a lot of times where we'll take this. We'll say, okay, customer A, let's look at your employees' needs. Let's look at what does a day look like in operational basic terms of your frontline staff. Let us build that. Let us build that straw mat out. Bring your team and let us show you, this is what we heard. This is what a day in the life would look like from beginning to end on the devices that your users have. That could be a tablet in a vehicle, right? It could be a handheld mobile device in a warehouse like Jeff showed. I've got customers with tablets and tracking devices of all kinds. But again, seeing that in your terms would be my statement of what next. Have your team, have the Witham team build out a day in the life and say, hey, here's what's possible, and show you what that's going to look like. So simple stuff. Jeff, I'll hand it over back to you.
Thanks, Ken. Great stuff. I'm going to leave everyone with, I already said my money slide, but this is my second money slide. I'm going to call this slide 5 must-have principles for a successful frontline worker program. Again, I think there were some questions. We're going to send out this deck, some of it without some of the case studies, because some of them I can't share, but we didn't really talk about this, but create an engaging user experience. Well, actually, I did talk about it because user experiences where if you can't find something, if it's hard to find, you're just not going to go there anymore, or you're going to call your person instead of trying to find it yourself. And see the community with what I would call the change agents, the evangelists, the super users, the ambassadors, whatever you want to call it. But let's get that going. Let's get that sort of internal buzz going, if you will. Incorporate rich media. Everybody likes to see their picture. Well, not everyone, but people like to see pictures of other people. They like to see pictures maybe of if you're in a restaurant, or if you're driving a truck and you see something kind of interesting. Say I'm a truck driver and I see something and I help them. And I don't know, I'm not saying take a selfie of yourself helping someone, but do things that are important. People like to see stories. They like to read stories, and they like to not necessarily be a part of the story, but let's get pictures in there. People like that, and videos. Deliver targeted content, enable personalization. My case study that I shared with you earlier, it's very important that if I'm a store associate versus someone that's in the office, that I get targeted content. And if I'm sitting here in Seattle, I'm going to get different content than maybe one of my colleagues that might be in New York or Florida. Focus on culture and leadership buy-in. This is usually an initiative by either a director of HR, a director of corporate communications, internal communications, if we're lucky enough, and a CEO or CIO or CTO or CISO, CRO, fill in the blank. If they have the sort of vision of what a frontline worker program could do, those are always the best ones. And then again, have them participate. I don't want them just there at the beginning, sort of like if you're trying to lose weight and you sort of cut out bread for the first week and you lose your 5 pounds, but then you have one slice and you gain it all back. We have to maintain this. It's not just a one-shot deal, right? Make it easy for me to participate. If it's not easy, I'm never going to do it. And then finally, my favorite, why are we doing this to begin with? Why do I run and work out every day? Because I like to eat so much. So I see value in it. If employees don't see value in it, they're never going to come. So answer the question, what's in it for me? The WIFMA. So, and I'm very, very good at helping organizations figure out what that sort of secret sauce is. Again, I don't care the Teams, Viva Connections, Power Platform, all the different things that make up a solution like this. We could talk about that more in depth at another time. I wanted to give everyone sort of a high level of what you need to do, some things that you need to start thinking about as you're going on this sort of journey. And I'd like to think that I'm your frontline worker Sherpa through this. So with that, this is us. We actually have got a with them blog that if I love this PowerPoint Live. I don't know if you know this or not, but all you have to do is just click on the link there and you get to subscribe to our blog. With that, I'm going to see if there are other questions. I know the two Kens have been answering them in the chat, but if there are questions or Brenna, if I left anything out, feel free to jump in. This has been, yeah, like a fire hose, yet refreshing.
Sure. Yeah, Ken and Ken were very active in the chat answering lots of great questions. There are a few questions that we frequently get about these topics, so I wanted to ask them here. Who are you typically interfacing with for projects like this?
On my end,
go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, on my end, I'll deal with, anyone from a director of collaboration, VP of technology, VP of HR. A lot of HR folks, sometimes they're involved, sometimes they're not. If an organization is large enough, they're going to have a director of internal communications or corporate communications, or actually director of business applications. I guess it depends on every organization. Ken's, what do you guys see?
I would say, HR, corporate comms, VP of innovation, those type of roles are often involved. So a lot of line of business contacts aligned with the parallel IT resources. But someone with innovation, HR, corporate communications, and a line of business resource that's specifically interested in digitizing a manual process, like a VP of warehousing or sales or plant operations.
Yeah, I would just add on top of that it has to start with, you have to have buy-in from one of the operations owners, one of the operations staff. Once you've got buy-in there, then it's easy. Then it's CorpCom, HR, IT, etc. But you've got to have buy-in from the business first.
Okay,
good question, Brenna.
Thanks, Brenna.
Oh, yeah, and then I think you kind of already touched on this briefly, but where do you start for a project like this? Like, what is the first step?
I know you've got three sort of consultants on the phone, so
easy.
I guess the consultant speak is it depends. But again, I mentioned this earlier, right? I don't love running. I run because I like to eat. So the problem I'm trying to solve there is so I don't get heavy. So I see value in running. What problem are we trying to solve? Are we just want these frontline workers engaged just for the sake of it? Or do we want to have a better customer experience, but that customer experience starts with the employee experience? Ken?
Yeah, I like to say kind of walk and run. So, generally like to start with the discovery and kind of understanding the requirements and building kind of short-term priorities and long-term priorities. Often it might be identity and a specific power app or some combination of corporate comms. So it's a different set of requirements for different sets of users. But the best way is to kind of let's do a discovery, and then we'll do a day in the life. And then that day in the life, we're going to probably show you a lot of things that are, everyone's going to want probably everything we talk about, but then it's a combination of prioritizing what you need first and what the top, priorities are. And of course, it's identity, onboarding, some simple scenarios, and then more complex scenarios down the road.
Yeah, I'm the developer in the group. My answer will be odd and probably different. But you start with a small project that you have a probability of high success that has the greatest visibility and impact that you can replicate, right? A small win that you can replicate and showcase internally that you can market and then grow across the teams. To me, it's no different than I've ever done with a lot of application development. This is very similar, and we've grown to grow. Everybody said sort of that same thing, crawl, walk, run. Where you start, though, something to be impactful across the org and touch the greatest number of users in a small window of time.
That's great. Thanks so much. And then after we get through those first couple of steps, what's next? Like, what's the launching off point for project?
I personally like to see, I want to get as much out of the box functionality. I know the question that I always get, how much does it cost? What do we need? And again, consultant speak, I guess it depends, but I want to get as much out of the box functionality. To be honest with you, the new SharePoint, there is so much functionality. SharePoint is sort of the ground, the concrete, and then maybe we layer on Viva connections. I want to see what you've got. I want to I don't want to break the bank. I don't always want to get a third party, and I'm sorry for any of my software friends that might be on the phone. I don't always want to opt for a, you know, I want to configure instead of customize, right? So as we're upgrading and as upgrades happen overnight, whether it's, you know, the new teams or whatever it is, I want to make it easy and I don't want to break the bank. So I want to get as much out of the box functionality first. Mr. Young?
I would agree. I think that's one thing that's really lost in a lot of this is what is the out of the box functionality. Maybe that speaks to our marketing, or I think we have a lot of it, but maybe not, right? Because a lot of my customers don't understand what's available. And that's across the Teams suite, Teams platform, and then the employee engagement or Viva suite, what they have out of the box with communications, with Engage, with learning. Right, I have customers that have developed MP4 learning files for years. So that's again that ability and bringing that in there, and they own it. And to your point, Jeff, I completely agree. Start with what you own, right? Start with what's there. Unless you've got some really unique scenario, you've got to be able to deploy it quickly and actually and have it be supportable. And supportability and the cost after implementation is critical as well. And that consideration has to be brought into play. Mr. Milner, thoughts?
Yeah, same, start small, identity power app, perhaps it's impactful. One of my recent customers just wanted to onboard users, do a simple newsletter and allow employees to access their payroll and tax forms. That was so impactful, they were ecstatic. Now they have some long-term plans for some more complex workflows, but one size doesn't fit all, and let's work with with them, your BDMs, and again choose the most impactful solution, which is going to produce immediate results and create a longer term plan as well.
One thing I'll toss out there too, you'll find with Microsoft, one thing we've done, and again, I won't talk licensing because I hate it, but the ability to have frontline licensing, whether it's calling licensing that's uniquely priced, whether it's the Viva platform, and some of those are uniquely priced, even Teams across and living in those F SKUs that we lovely affectionately call. But I think that's a big thing too, knowing what you have out of the box, looking what's not there out of the box, but what you could add, but then understanding is it for those frontline staff, and it may be very much a cost differential between that and what it would be for a knowledge worker, because that need is not there. Walkie-talkie is a good example. Out of the box feature you could turn on for all your knowledge workers. I don't think you want them using walkie-talkie across the office. It could be fun to watch, but again, that's there, right? Scheduling, same thing. It's there. It's probably not enabled. Doesn't need to be enabled. So a lot of that's just that, understanding what's there, what's available for those workers, and enabling for that right use case. And then the last piece I'll talk on to is ensure you're looking at some of the new abilities for operations to manage those apps and enable those features and functions in that crawl walk scenario. So you could deploy Teams to your users, but only turn on a really small subset of features and functions easily, right? Tomorrow you could do that. And then their manager, if you decide to delegate that way, could enable features over time. So you roll them out, but you're not redeploying something. You just simply, an icon shows up. And now prioritization of those icons can be set by their manager, by HR, by CorpCom, by policy as well. So think about that too. Those abilities are there. And I think when Jeff talks about that day in the life and kind of building that out and showing that, you start to realize, oh, wow, I never even knew these abilities were there and how to light them up. And Jeff can definitely help with that.
I'm going to share, I have a video series called the Power Minute and soon the Viva Minute. I'm going to share the first episode. We've done about 15 of these. Actually, yes, you'll be opening the app and center for everyone. No, I don't want to do that. I just want to share it. Let me do that. Everyone, there you go. I'm sharing the first episode. We've done about 15, 16 of these. If you're not sure about what the Power Platform is, we break it down, Andrea and I, And the good news, bad news. It's a little bit longer than a minute, as you can tell. I like talking, and my colleague Andrea likes talking, and so check that out. And then soon we're having a Viva Minute because, as we know, Viva gets more and more complex, and there's so many nuances to some of the new things that are coming out. Everything from Viva Sales, Viva Goals, two of my new favorites are out. Obviously, Connections, Insights, Topics, Amplify, Engage, Glint. There's so many great things happening. We are really at an amazing day and age in technology. I know between the two Kens and I, we've been doing it for, I'm sure, 50 years plus. So we're at a great age of technology, and Microsoft just keeps on investing in it.
So Jeff or Brenna, a question for you. Once we're done with this recording, I know we have several questions about people that wanted to share it internally. What are their options to do so once this recording's done? How will they have access to it?
Oh, sure. We'll be sending out an email from us, and
Okay.
it'll have a copy of the recording and also a PDF of the slides, like Jeff mentioned.
Awesome.
And we have
Can't
one
beat
more
that.
question in the chat from Tal Fisher. Do you want to answer that offline, or can you do that now? I know we're almost
Okay, I
out
can
of
do it.
time.
Yeah, there's definitely
Okay.
not-for-profit pricing out there. Work with your local Microsoft team. I've done a lot of nonprofit stuff in the past on Edu, very different. So there's definitely licensing options there. But talk to your local Microsoft team, and they can definitely help you there.
Yeah, we
Or
can connect you.
reseller.
My wife works for a nonprofit, and they use Teams. So yeah, we definitely have some solutions for you.
Awesome. And with that, I
Okay.
think.
Yeah,
ahead,
I
Brenna.
think that's it. Thank you so much, Jeff, and our friends at Microsoft, Ken Young and Ken Milner.